Good afternoon and welcome to our sustainability session. If you were this morning on a keynote address of Antonio Neri, have you noticed how many times the word sustainability was used by Antonio and every guest speaker? It is really becoming top of all our hearts and minds. So my name is Biljana Weber. I'm a managing director for Northern Western Europe, and I'm a proud European that we take sustainability seriously in Europe, and we want to be the first continent that will be carbon zero. And I recently had a number of meetings in Brussels with the European Union commissioners, and each and every of them mentioned sustainability as one of the key topics on their agenda. Doesn't matter whether they were responsible for labor, whether they were responsible for jurisdiction or for economy or for digital, all of them were talking about sustainability as the most important part of their job to make sure Europe is going to reach the goals we have set ourselves for. And in our industry, the heart of our industry is innovation. So it is really on top of mind of everybody of us how to drive innovation and at the same time balance the sustainability goals. Because we have to look at the innovation very, very professionally and seriously, and what this innovation means when it comes to sustainability, from the design of the product or service to the implementation to the operations. And we think about AI. That was a major topic this morning. You have heard on a stage that AI is very hungry for a compute power behind, and also a huge consumption of energy and water as well. Because the next topic that will come on the agenda of European Union is going to be water, and you will hear more about that from the European Union commissioners going forward as well. So if you look at a regular data center, it needs only 10 megawatts to operate. And only one AI supercomputer needs 100 megawatts. So it's really something that we need to think about seriously, where to run these workloads that are AI workloads, in which countries, in those that have green energy and where the energy efficiency is the highest. And there are a number of the Nordics countries that are seeing an increased number of the data centers being built. If I name just a few, Norway and Iceland were known before, but now also Sweden and Finland are becoming very, very popular in this respect. Talking about European Union, there is a new regulation, Energy and Efficiency Directive, that is going to come into force in May 2024, where CIOs will need to report on how they are impacting energy efficiency in their organizations as well. So the sustainability and energy efficiency is on a radar screen and the top of mind of every board, and now also of every CIO. And we work with a number of the customers and partners that are having sustainability as the top of their mind, as a crucial part of their strategy. And I'm very happy that we are going to have a very interesting panel for you today with 3 distinguished guests. We're going to have a representative from ATIA. ATIA is the largest system integrator in Nordics and in Baltics, and they have a huge focus on sustainability and how they're providing IT services to their customers. We will be hearing from TESE, which is a French hoster, Tier 4, that is doing a great job with the digital twins, and they will share more about that. And we are going to have a guest from Telefónica. It's a global telecommunication company headquartered in Spain, and they will share with us what they do with 5G and networks and how they are managing sustainability through the initiatives they're driving as well. So with this, I would like to invite on the stage John Frey, our Chief Sustainability Officer at HP, to moderate the panel.
Thank you. Well, it's a delight to be with each of you today. We find ourselves at this nexus between technology innovation and sustainable IT. And for the past 2 decades, I've had the privilege of leading a group of technologists that think about sustainable IT. They learn, they write the white papers that we freely share with customers, and have been on a journey with each of you to make a lowering of our carbon footprint and to accelerate our journeys to sustainable IT. So as you heard, we have a great panel for you this morning. They are here to accelerate your progress. They're here to equip you and hopefully excite you a little bit about some of the opportunities. So let's invite them up. So first we have Chiara Silvetti from ATIA. She is our Director of Sustainable Business. Chiara, come join me. And next we have Pascal Lecoq he's with HPE, he's the Worldwide Director of Sustainable Data Center Modernization. And finally, Alejandro Escobar, he is with Telefonica. He's the ESG Customer and Business Development Leader. So welcome. So Chiara, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your role at ATIA, and also can you highlight some of the sustainable IT implications of newer technologies that customers are using or they want to use, including AI?
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Great introduction, Miliana. I love talking about this new sort of regulation wave that is coming, that it's really forcing us to think through sustainability. My role is to integrate the decarbonization, circularity, and human rights principles into our business. So I work a lot with all of our business lines, I work with all of our sales colleagues, and I work a lot with customers. And ATIA sits sort of at the interface between the fantastic technologies that you provide and the applications that the customers are thinking about and how they use them. And we've been talking about sustainable IT also for years. We've been asking our customers what they think about sustainable IT for 7 years now, and already 4 or 5 years ago, the vast majority of about 600 CIOs were telling us, well, I see it my job to think about how do I reduce the environmental impact of IT. So that was, it was fairly unusual, I think, in some other parts of the world. But now we are seeing that, of course, new technologies are coming in, and I think from an AI perspective, we are in front of a much more complex technology, much more advanced technology, and you mentioned some of the stats about sort of how much energy hungry this technology is. And so we need to think about what are the impacts on the embedded footprint, the embedded water footprint, how we are going to use water to cool it, the minerals that need to be extracted to actually power these supercomputers, and also, well, we are in the middle of a green transition. All of those minerals are also needed for the green technologies that we need. So we run into a potential of competing for resources, but I think the core question is, well, given all of this impact, how do we use AI to transform the world into an energy lean and resource lean economy? Because that's exactly where we need to get to.
Yeah, a lot of factors to balance here. So Pascal, speaking of balance, introduce yourself and your role, but then tell us, how do you balance a Tier 4 highly resilient data center with sustainability as well?
Yeah, and it was a challenge at the very beginning. So at HPE, I'm leading the worldwide sustainable data center modernization practice, and I'm here to represent Antoine Fournier, so TZ Data Center CEO, who is in fact, let's say, staying at home due to COVID. So, but I mean, this data center, in fact, we were the designer, builder, and also commissioner of the data center. And the challenge at the very beginning for this newcomer in France, in fact, in terms of co-location company, was to, let's say, differentiate themselves from, let's say, the competition, from the hyperscalers, from the legacy colo players. I will name nobody, but I mean, you understand who I'm talking about. So the first differentiation, as you said, was to set the first Tier 4 certified data center in France. And it has been. So something that is not really challenging for us due to our expertise in data center engineering. So it's a Tier 4 design data center, and also in terms of critical facility implementation. So it's a TCCF for the specialists and TCDD. Then, as you said, the challenge for a Tier 4 data center for which everything is redundant and so on is to be very efficient in terms of energy, but also in terms of carbon footprint for us. Because, the debate till a couple of years ago was always to say, okay, what about the PUE? What about the PUE? So everybody now knows more or less to engineer data centers that has a low PUE. I mean, it's not rocket science. And if you look, for example, at the latest publication from the Uptime Institute about that, we can see that for a couple of years now, for 2-3 years, the PUE diminution is just flattening. Yep. It's something like now getting to a kind of, let's say, 1.3 or so. Okay, so the challenge was to have a PUE of less than 1.3. So in terms of engineering of the cooling system, because most of this is related to the cooling system, so we have innovated with several, let's say, new technology that we have used in order to get PUE, average PUE that is 1.25 after 2.5 years of production, of exploitation now. But then this was also about getting differentiation. For example, if we want to get into low carbon footprint and much more efficiency, this is to get to high density. Because the more you are in the density in terms of rack density, the more you are efficient. So the design has been, and for colocation player, you will see what is the difference with legacy player. We are reaching an average 30 kilowatt per rack density, rather than, let's say, 8 to 10 average for classical legacy colocation player. And most of this, in fact, is also due to the fact that we have planned the data center to be DLC ready, direct liquid cooling ready. So every customer can get into a data hall and also plug his DLC rack to the warm water loop in the data center. So this is something that is really efficient because, as you can understand, with the DLC rack you can get water in at 30, 35 degrees and out 45, 50 degrees. So this is, in terms of cooling, much more efficient than a classical chill water system. Then it's not only about engineering, and they wanted, and we wanted them to be really differentiated to the versus competition, implementing digital twin, to better monitor, to better optimize the operating conditions, and also implementing an artificial intelligence engine on the cooling system that is really mastering, more than monitoring, that is mastering the cooling system in order to optimize it and bring the right frigory, the right calorie, negative calorie, to the right place at the right moment. And everything, of course, under the digital twin monitoring system.
Great. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of implications to consider. Alejandro, will you tell us a little bit about your role? And then how are you and how is Telefonica thinking about the balance between the environmental cost or the footprint and the beneficial use of these advanced technologies?
Well, hi, John. Hi, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank for the opportunity to participate in this panel. We have been talking about that climate change is responsible for many of the major risk factors for today's economy. We know we have been warned by the expert that we need to reach net zero emissions by 2050 globally if we want to limit the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. But in this context, we can take the new technologies as an allies for the potential to decarbonize other sectors of the economy, right? We are talking about twin transitions, green transition and digital transition, but we cannot ignore the negative impacts they also have. So in this regard, at Telefonica, we are really committed with our ambitious environmental strategy, seeking both to minimize the negative impact on the planet and maximizing the key role that new technologies have. As such, we have the main goal of becoming a net zero company by 2040, which is 10 years in advance of the date required by the scientific community, considering all the value chain and becoming the first telco in the world to have these targets validated by the Science Based Targets initiative. Regarding the first pillar, as the telecommunications network are the backbone of the rest of digital solutions, we work to achieve the most efficient and sustainable telecommunication network. Actually, last week we have tightened the deadlines of our operational emissions reductions. We are planning to reduce them 90% by 2030, scopes 1 and 2. And for the scope 3, we have the goal to reduce them 56% by 2030. For the residual emissions that we will not be able to eliminate, we have the goal of neutralized all of them 100% by 2040. Some of the measures we are taking in this regard related to renewable energy, for example, are power purchase agreements, guarantees of origin or self-generation. Also, we are working on the improvement of our energy efficiency. In this regard, we are working on our network transformation, of the modernization of our obsolete equipment, the implementation of power-saving filters as well. On the scope 3, we, for example, include climate change requirements to our strategic suppliers on the procurement process. And for the neutralization part, we try to purchase the carbon credits in the most efficient possible way, or even implementing and developing own carbon removal projects. And regarding the second pillar, to help our customers, we try to promote digitalization and connectivity to help them to become more efficient, more doing things in a more responsible way. Some lines of actions in this regard are the development and implementation of new technology solutions, also the rollout of connectivity, or, for example, the participation in the European Green Digital Coalition, in which also HPE participates, by the way, which is an initiative coming from the European Commission trying to promote the green transition into the IT sector. And with all of these measures within these two pillars, we are trying to minimizing the harmful effects of new technologies and at the same time maximizing the key role they play for the green transition.
Yeah, so a lot of factors in play here. And you heard about some of the company challenges, some of the customer challenges. So let's move on and explore that a little bit. I'm going to have each of you weigh in on, when you work with customers, or even when you're doing these programs internally, what are some of the things that are top of mind that you need to pay attention to? And what are the barriers that you're hearing from customers that we need to help them get over to accelerate their journey? Kira, let's start with you.
Thank you. That's an excellent question, because every organization is different in terms of their maturity, how far they come, and you heard you've set your goals. But what is important from a customer perspective is that you actually align your goals internally. And it's great to actually set a company-wide ambition, but unless you're as a CIO, you actually feel that you got that mandate and responsibility, and unless you actually talk to your procurement guys and to your sustainability colleagues to align those goals, then you're not going to get much faster. And one of the things we discuss often, John, is that we see still a lot of companies that do not have a sustainable IT strategy, and it's not that many. I think it's getting down, but I think that is really where to start. You really need to bring in your sustainability implications into your IT strategy. When it comes to AI, that's the sort of next step in terms of bringing your IT strategy at the service of the long-term business strategy. And that long-term business strategy nowadays needs to incorporate this net zero emissions. So it's bringing that technology at the service of the net zero emissions. The other barrier is education, and I think guidance generally. And one of the things we've been doing in working with our customers is to provide sort of opportunities to network and build networks of expertise and best practices. We have a network that is called Leadership for Change that brings together those companies that are absolutely at the forefront of integrating sustainability in their IT, and they provide best practices to each other. And that, combined with the guidance that's come from the like of you, and the actual real cases example, is what makes people act, because they need role models. They need both a narrative, they need a framework that you provide, and then they need role models to actually be able to act. So that's some ways in which we actually help our customers navigate those considerations.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that I heard in Kira's answer is not all of these challenges are difficult. Sometimes they're literally getting the right organizations together within the customer environment. From our team of technologists, we're often introducing the customer's sustainability team to their own technology team and suggesting that if they work together, they could really accelerate this progress. So Pascal, what are some of those things that you're hearing from other customers across your network and some of the barriers?
Yeah, so the thing is that, okay, we have, let's say, kind of chance at HPE to meet end customers and to meet colocation players, of course, and to work with all those communities. So the thing is that if we want to say the truth, without filters, that 5 years ago, 7 years ago, you were discussing with a colo player, they just didn't care about energy efficiency, about sustainability. What they was caring of this was to capture customers, to provide electricity and cooling, and at the end of the day, the end customer would pay for the electricity bill, whatever it was, So now it cannot work with this model. So newcomers like Teze and also, I would say, legacy players now are rethinking their whole strategy. This is to cope and even to be ahead of the sustainability strategy from their end customers. So what do they need to do? This is to provide something like a data center that is, of course, very energy efficient, that is also carbon efficient now, okay? Because at the end of the day, we were talking about the EED, from the Europe starting in May 2024. At the end of the day, even if you are off-prem from a colo, you will have to report, on it. You have to report even if you are not owning your own data center. And all those KPIs will have to be reported, but will have to be auditable. This means that you will have the obligation to prove how you have calculated that, and it's not an easy stuff to do. So tools like digital twin are really providing a help in that, because this is something that is auditable, something from you capture exactly what you are consuming as energy and of course what you are emitting as CO2, etc., in order to report. But again, this is also a way to optimize your carbon footprint, because the digital twin together with an AI engine, as we have implemented here, is something that help you to optimize the operating condition of the data center. And more than that, for a colo player, colo player business model is something like, let's compare that to an airline company. An airline company, their strategy and their business objective, this is to take off each plane 100% full. So what are they doing? They sell overbooking. They overbook the tickets, okay? And say, okay, with all the guys that will not present, at the check-in and so on, make that maybe 100% of the seats will be occupied. So the data center, this is it. Typically in colocation, for example, when you design a data hall that is, let's take an easy example, 1 megawatt of capacity, they want to know how many they can sell as contracts more than 1 megawatt, maybe 1.2, 1.5 megawatt, because they know that all the customers that are installed in the data hall will not consume 100% of their contractual capacity at the same time. So this is really, working on the borderline to know how much I can propose to my customer. And of course, a data center that is 100%, not to say full, but 100% utilized will be much more efficient, than something that is only 70%. So this kind of intelligent tools like a digital twin, artificial intelligence can help definitely to, let's say, monitor this borderline.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alejandro, Telefonica as a telecom provider sort of extends that network and IT infrastructure out. So what are the things you're hearing from customers and some of the barriers?
Yeah, in our case, I think the main barrier we encounter when we have conversations with our customers is that, as we have been commented also, IT procurement professionals do not have a lot of expertise in sustainability. So they are normally aware about the operational or the cost-saving efficiencies, but they are not always aware that there can also be some environmental benefits that can contribute positively to the sustainability strategies of their companies. So in this regard, at Telefonica, we have created which we call the EcoSmart Seal, which allow the identification in a really simple and easy to understand way which environmental benefits can our digital solutions contribute or generate in our customers' businesses. The seal has 4 icons representing 4 environmental benefits, which are energy saving, reduction of water consumption, reduction of CO2 emission, and promotion of circular economy. And these icons are basically colored to identify which environmental benefit each solution impact when applicable. So we have already verified the portfolio of our operations with the EcoSmart Seal in Spain, Germany, UK, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Peru, Mexico, and also in Telefónica Global Solutions. And AENOR, which is the third-party verification company in charge of the process, has certified that more than 50% of our B2B products can contribute and can help our customers mitigating the negative environmental impacts. So yeah, with this simple seal, we are contributing to helping our customers and also internally our commercial and sales teams to understand a little bit how sustainability works in the IT sector.
Great, yeah. And I want to come back to a point that Pascal mentioned a minute ago, that normally and historically in sustainable IT, we've operated above a regulatory framework because there wasn't much regulation in this area. But Pascal hit on the European Union Energy Efficiency Directive and this concept of auditability. So Pascal, do you want to start and talk about some of the regulatory implications, both in the EU and beyond, that you're hearing from customers and how you're helping them adapt to that?
Yeah, so European Union, to say the truth, is really ahead of other countries or other, let's say, consolidation of geographies or countries and so on. But it's not the only one, you know, and there are some countries, you don't think of those, you know, that are really starting something and pushing something, you know, like India, like Asia and so on. Unfortunately, US are a little bit behind, but we know about the geopolitical context of the US that is specific. And typically, you know, India, this is something that they are really pushing now because they start really from something that is at this level, you know, and so they are pushing to get that. And typically, even if there is not this EED yet, there is another thing. Typically, if some company wants to get a public sector market now in India, they have to demonstrate that globally they will contribute to the sustainability objective of the country that is in fact a continent. So this is something that is really at stake in a lot of countries or a lot of regions, definitely. And so, coming back to this EED, this is something on which we are working a lot, and even before the EED, you know, HPE was one of the, let's say, initial writing members of the European Code of Conduct for data centers, you know, and if you look at the initial writers, there is one that was from HP at that time. So we are working a lot with our customer for years in this area, and always with the objective to say, okay, let's not take only the data center part of it. Let's look at the whole IT framework. So our motto is from the chip to the chiller. So really consider the end-to-end, you know, because the data center, this is done to operate IT. And if we look at new use cases like HPC, AI, but not only. So we were talking about HPC, we talk a lot about AI and all, I would say, the infrastructure issues that you can get. For example, our largest Cray EX4000 system, it's featuring 400 kilowatt per cabinet. 400 kilowatt per cabinet, so full DLC. There is not a single proprietary or legacy colo data center that can run this kind of big boy, you know. But okay, let's take other, let's say, classical use case. Just compute, classical compute, you know, with new generation of CPUs. Not either talking about GPUs, you know, with the Gen 12 coming, you know, we will be really getting to the limit of what we can do with air-cooled. Air-cooled is no more possible when you are talking about a single U server developing more than 1 kilowatt. So if you got a 47U rack, you know, what does it mean? This means 50 kilowatt per rack. So this is why we are now proposing even our ProLiant legacy servers together with DLC. And so definitely for us, DLC or other kind of loosely coupled liquid cooling system will be the standard in let's say, is it a short term when we say 3 to 5 years? I mean, this switch will have to occur. And anyway, this switch will contribute to sustainability because using direct liquid cooling with warm water loop is something that is much more efficient and much more carbon friendly than a classical air-cooled system.
Yep, thank you. Alejandro, I know you guys have been looking really hard at the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. What are you learning and what advice would you have for the audience around compliance with that directive?
Yeah, well, we have been talking about this as well. There is an increasing demand for transparency on how companies report and obviously manage their ESG, environmental, social, and governance aspects. And we've been hearing also about this concept of regulatory tsunami, right? To refer to all these EDD, European taxonomy, CSRD, and I could mention hundreds of or thousands. The main objective of the CSRD is the integration of the ESG topics, not only from the reporting perspective, although the name is basically reporting directive, but also considering in the governance, in the strategy, and also in the identification and measurement of the different impacts, risks, and opportunities in relation with these ESG topics. So some of the main challenges that companies will need to face with this directive would be the elaboration of a double materiality analysis, which will consider not only how company impact in the environment and the society, but also how the ESG topics impact the company from a financial perspective. Also, there will be a need for extension of the organizational boundaries. So companies will need to consider also the full value chain, which is a really great challenge, considering suppliers, subcontractors, etc. And for me, if you ask me personally, and we've been mentioned this as well, it will be the implications for the audits. So the challenge of having a strong, developing, or strengthening non-financial information control environment. So teams will need to work on this really detailed description of the end-to-end process of the information. They need to use IT robust tools to collect, to consolidate, and to report this information. And also audit companies will need to change from the limited assurance of this information to the reasonable assurance in the midterm. And this will come a lot of effort from companies to comply with this. So let's see how we are adapting to these new challenges of the regulatory tsunami.
Yeah, the clock is ticking on some of these. And Chiara, one of the things that I really love about ATIA is you bring together technology leaders and technology purchasers for an annual event. You have an advisory group. So when you're having those conversations, what are you hearing from a regulatory perspective and a barrier perspective?
Yeah, and exactly as you said, there is a tsunami of regulation that is coming. One that you were probably looking for is the CSDDD, that is all about supply chain due diligence. But what we're hearing is that, well, companies have been working on sustainable IT for a while. I mentioned that already quite a number of years ago, CIOs were understanding that this was their responsibility. What they're looking now is also for partnerships that end-to-end can help them understand what is material, what it is that in your IT environment is really material that you manage, depending on how your structure is, because most companies have got a hybrid structure, and how you get the data. And the data quality is, I think, where a lot of companies are going to be stumbling upon, because you need to understand, well, how do you not get dragged into a lot of details, but still providing, that sort of auditability data. And as you mentioned, there are for many companies, it will be a no-brainer to invest in digital twins. Maybe some other companies will not have the budget for doing something like that, so they need to find a way to manage those data otherwise. So getting the data and also getting the understanding of how do you report on those data that are material for you to report on. So that is something that we're hearing. And ultimately, it's really about providing that guidance and having the right partnership. We are repackaging our sustainable data center offering very much geared towards that, guiding them through that process of getting their data center certified if that's what they want to do, or getting the right input. Can I just add one thing about the driving that sort of transparency of data and driving those data across the industry? Because, I mean, HP, you've been a leader in this sector for many, many years, but ultimately, all of the customer Scope 3 emissions and your Scope 3 emission come from somewhere as well in the supply chain. And yours are primarily located at the customers, but depending on what it is that you purchase, you've got the full supply chain back. And one of the things that we need to realize that we are all part of one ecosystem. So as a customer, you also have a responsibility to set requirements back to the industry and really give a very clear message. So I love it when you say, you know, we ask all of our partners to set science-based targets. We've got about 75% of our top 180 partners that actually set science-based targets, but it's not often in requirement, it's not often in RFPs. So the minute you actually put it in an RFP, then you're going to drive a big change as well to help you with CSRD compliance as well.
Yeah, and I would say not only put it in your RFP, but let us know what it's worth. Exactly. Often we don't know if there's any value to having a great answer and being a leader versus having a marginal answer. We're starting to hear that more in public tenders, the value of the sustainability pieces of the tender. In one case, we know it's 25% of the total value of the tender. So we only have a few moments left. We promised to equip each of you. So I'm going to ask each of you to give us one bit of advice that you would give this audience as they accelerate their journey. Alejandro, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, so let me emphasize just a few points that we have already commented here. Let's start with the people factor. I think it's essential that both internally, our IT teams, our commercial teams, or sales teams, and also externally, our customers are aware that how relevant sustainability is and how the digital solutions can help them to make their activities and their businesses more sustainable and efficient. Second would be to ensure the vision. So it's the protection of the planet and the management of the other social and ethics aspect should be inherent to any activity, to any company, and to any sector, and should be always there in conversations between the commercial teams and the customers for them to really understand and to pay attention to these aspects. Moreover, I'm gonna repeat what you have said. As new technologies are part of an ecosystem, it's really important that each developer of each layer of the digital solution play its part in the reduction of the environmental impact, right? Otherwise, a positive net impact will not be possible. So fostering collaboration between technology partners would be the other piece of advice that I would give to companies that want to promote this green transition.
Perfect. Pascal, one piece of advice.
One piece of advice is really for me to think ahead and to think about, let's say, out of the box and breakthrough solutions. And by the way, as I said, this is really to think like a kind of end-to-end chain, not only focusing on one piece, but really the larger picture. So from the business case, the application, to the IT infrastructure, to the data center. Because we didn't talk yet about the application layers, but for example, application migration and everything that you do in terms of optimizing how the application is running on the IT can also lead to substantial sustainability objective and limiting the carbon footprint. Because when we talk about the PUE, the PUE is a ratio, for example, but usually when I start discussing the PUE with the customer, I say, what about the one of the PUE? How can we address the one of the P? How can we limit the consumption of the IT part of it? And this is about IT infrastructure, but this is also about how the application is developed. So think the whole spectrum. Think application, IT, data center in the sustainability objectives.
Thanks. And Chiara, you have the last word on this topic. Your bit of advice.
And I love what you said, because it's really about bringing that discussion into the strategic room. And AI, IT, and sustainability now more than ever belong in the management room. And when you think about your architecture, when you think about what is IT, what objectives should IT and, of course, AI and other technologies help you in your company, you need to bring that discussion there, because at that point you can align those and then ensure that all of your processes will think through all of those steps after that.
Wonderful. Well, you've heard it. Get your people involved. Think solution-wide, think stack-wide, and then consider these topics a management and leadership topic, not just a tactical topic. And what I would say is, from my bit of advice to you, don't reinvent the wheel. Start with the knowledge that's already out there. We've mentioned some white papers that HPE brings to bear. We've mentioned forums that ATIA puts together. We've mentioned the expertise on Pierre's team and Telefonica and all the ways that they contribute. So reach out and ask others, how are they handling these challenges, what they're doing, are there any best practices they would share? Because collectively, we all get better together. So thank you so much for your attendance. Will you help me thank our panel for today?